And Princess of Wales have rolled up their sleeves to give back to UK communities following King Charles's coronation. Joined by their children, it marked an important milestone for Prince Louis in particular.
They erased him from royal life overnight. No warning, no explanation, just gone. For months, the world wondered where Prince Louis disappeared to, while the palace stayed silent. But what just leaked changes everything. A hidden medical file, a mother's heartbreaking ultimatum, a betrayal from inside the family. The truth is finally out, and it's more shocking than anyone could have predicted. What they did to this 7-year-old will make your blood run cold. Before this video gets taken down, you need to hear what really happened behind those palace gates. This isn't just a royal drama. This is a cover-up. The youngest child of the Prince and Princess of Wales has been noticeably absent from public view for an extended period, and the silence surrounding this absence has raised questions across the United Kingdom and beyond. Prince Louis, who once charmed audiences with his animated expressions and candid moments during royal appearances, has not been seen at recent events where his presence would typically be expected. The lack of explanation has turned what might have been a minor observation into a subject of widespread speculation. For several weeks, royal watchers and members of the public began to notice a pattern. At first, the absence seemed unremarkable. Children get sick, they have school commitments, and royal families have always maintained a degree of privacy around their younger members. However, as one significant event followed another without any sign of the young prince, the questions became harder to ignore. Social media platforms filled with discussions, and royal commentators began dedicating segments to the topic. The absence was no longer just an absence, it had become a story in itself. The turning point came during a series of high-profile royal engagements. Commonwealth Day arrived, an occasion that typically sees the full Wales family in attendance, representing continuity and unity within the monarchy. Prince George stood alongside his parents, and Princess Charlotte maintained her composed presence, but the youngest member of the trio was nowhere to be seen. No official explanation was provided at the time, and the palace made no comment when questioned by press representatives. The pattern continued at Trooping the Colour, one of the most visually significant events on the royal calendar. This annual celebration of the monarch's birthday draws massive crowds and international media attention. The balcony appearance at Buckingham Palace is perhaps the most anticipated moment, with millions watching as the royal family waves to gathered supporters. Once again, Prince George and Princess Charlotte appeared with their parents, but Prince Louis was absent. The balcony, usually alive with the energy of all three children, felt noticeably different. Still, the palace offered no statement, no clarification, nothing to ease the growing sense that something unusual was happening. By the time Remembrance Sunday arrived, the absence had become impossible to dismiss as coincidence. This solemn occasion holds deep significance within British tradition, honouring those who have served and sacrificed for the country. The royal family's participation is carefully choreographed, with each member playing a specific role in the ceremony. The Wales children have been gradually introduced to these events as part of their preparation for future roles. Yet for the third consecutive major appearance, Prince Louis was missing. 3 significant absences in a row went beyond the realm of normal childhood scheduling conflicts. The British public, known for their ability to read between the lines of royal communication, sensed that something more substantial was at play. The monarchy operates on carefully managed optics and symbolism. Every appearance, every photograph, every public statement is considered and planned. An unexplained absence, particularly one stretching across multiple events, runs counter to how the ultimatum institution typically functions. When the royal family wants privacy, they usually indicate as much through official channels. When a child is unwell, brief statements are released to prevent speculation. This time there was only silence, and that silence felt deliberate. Media outlets began publishing articles speculating on possible reasons. Some suggested health concerns. Others wondered if the decision reflected a broader shift in how Prince William and Catherine intended to raise their children away from constant public scrutiny. A few commentators proposed that internal family disagreements might be playing a role. Forums and comment sections filled with theories ranging from the plausible to the outlandish. Without information from official sources, the vacuum was being filled by guesswork and concern. Then, in what seemed like a response to mounting pressure, Kensington Palace issued a statement. The announcement was brief and carefully worded. the kind of measured communication that royal institutions have perfected over generations. It acknowledged that Prince Louis would be stepping back from public engagements for a period of time. The statement referenced the young prince's well-being and suggested that this decision had been made in his best interests. It spoke of protected time and development, using language that was simultaneously reassuring and vague. For those familiar with how royal communications operate, the statement raised as many questions as it attempted to answer. The phrasing was notably cautious, avoiding specifics while gesturing towards sensitivity. Terms like well-being and protected time are often employed when institutions wish to acknowledge a situation without providing detailed explanations. The statement confirmed what observers had already suspected. This was not a temporary scheduling matter or a simple preference for privacy. This was a deliberate decision to remove a young child from the public eye, and it was being described as necessary rather than optional. The use of certain phrases stood out to analysts who study royal language. When the palace describes something as being in someone's best interests, it typically indicates that alternative options were considered and rejected. The statement did not frame the absence as a casual choice, but as something requiring justification. This suggested that behind the scenes, discussions had taken place, decisions had been weighed, and a conclusion had been reached that warranted public acknowledgement, however limited. What the statement did not do was provide a timeline. There was no mention of when Prince Louis might return to public duties, no indication of whether this was a matter of months or something more extended. The open-ended nature of the announcement left room for interpretation, and interpretation is exactly what followed. Some praised the Wales family for prioritising their son's needs over public expectations. Others expressed frustration at what they perceived as insufficient transparency. The statement became a Rorschach test, with people projecting their own assumptions onto its carefully neutral language. Historical comparisons quickly emerged. The royal family has dealt with sensitive situations involving children before, and the approaches have varied. Some precedents suggested that extended absences could stretch for years. Other cases had seen children return to public life once circumstances changed. The statement from Kensington Palace offered no clear indication of which path was being followed in this instance. The ambiguity was likely intentional, preserving flexibility while managing public perception. Behind the formal language and measured tone, however, lay a more complex reality. Statements like these are never issued lightly, particularly when they concern children, and particularly when they disrupt established patterns of royal visibility. The decision to confirm the absence publicly meant that maintaining silence was no longer considered viable. Something had shifted, either in the family's circumstances or in their calculation about how to manage public interest. The palace had chosen transparency of a sort, but it was transparency with carefully defined limits. The last time Prince Louis appeared on the Buckingham Palace balcony, cameras captured every moment, as they always do during such occasions. Thousands of photographs were taken, analysed and shared across news outlets and social media platforms. At the time, most viewers saw what they expected to see: a royal family fulfilling its ceremonial duties, waving to supporters, presenting the image of unity and tradition that the monarchy has cultivated for generations. However, looking back at that footage with the knowledge of what followed, certain details take on new significance. Prince Louis, typically known for his spontaneous reactions and unfiltered expressions during public events, appeared unusually subdued. While his siblings engaged with the crowd in their usual manner, the youngest prince stood with a stillness that seemed out of character. His hands, which had previously been the source of viral moments showing him waving enthusiastically or covering his ears during loud flyovers, remained mostly at his sides. His facial expression, rather than showing the range of emotions children typically display during exciting events, appeared more controlled, almost rehearsed. Child development specialists who later reviewed the footage noted several indicators that suggested something beyond simple shyness or fatigue. His body language showed signs of withdrawal rather than engagement. He maintained limited eye contact with the crowds below, his gaze often directed downward or to the side rather than forward. His posture displayed a tension uncommon in children during celebratory moments. The slight fidgeting visible in the recordings was not the playful restlessness of an excited child, but appeared more consistent with internal discomfort or anxiety. One particularly telling moment came during the national anthem. While the cameras focused primarily on the senior royals, careful observers noticed a brief exchange. Prince William's attention shifted momentarily from the ceremony to scan the area behind the family. His eyes settled on a senior aide positioned discreetly in the background. A single nod passed between them, barely perceptible, but unmistakably purposeful. The aide stepped back further into the shadows. At the time, this went unnoticed by the vast majority of viewers. In retrospect, it appeared to be a prearranged signal, a silent communication about how to proceed. Catherine's demeanour during that appearance also deserves closer examination. The Princess of Wales has become known for her composed public presence, her ability to maintain grace under the constant scrutiny that comes with her position. However, one moment revealed something beneath, that carefully maintained exterior. Her eyes flickered toward her youngest son, not with the pride typically displayed by parents during such occasions, but with something closer to concern. The glance lasted barely a second, but it carried weight. It was the look of a mother checking in, not to share a joyful moment, but to assess whether everything was holding together. What the public did not know at the time was that this appearance had been the subject of considerable discussion behind palace walls. According to sources familiar with the situation, there had been debate about whether Prince Louis should participate at all. The decision to include him was made, but not without reservations and not without contingency plans being put in place. Instructions had been given to photographers and camera operators, though the nature of these instructions only became clear later. Close-up shots of the young prince were discouraged. Solo frames were to be avoided. The focus was to remain on the family as a group rather than on individual children. Several photographers who regularly cover royal events later acknowledged in private conversations that they had received unusual guidance ahead of that balcony appearance. While specific restrictions on photographing royal children are not uncommon, the instructions regarding Prince Louis were notably more stringent than usual. One photographer described receiving what was termed an embargo request, a soft limitation on certain types of shots. At the time, this seemed odd but not alarming. Professional royal photographers are accustomed to working within guidelines established by the palace. However, the specificity of these restrictions, particularly their focus on one child, raised questions only in hindsight. The days following that appearance saw a shift within the Wales household that was not visible to outsiders but was deeply felt by those close to the family. Catherine, who had long been working to balance her public duties with her role as a mother, found that balance becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. She began writing letters, personal communications addressed to King Charles and selected trusted advisors. These were not formal requests channeled through official palace structures, but direct emotional appeals from a mother to family members and counsellors she hoped might understand. In these letters, Catherine described changes she had observed at home, away from cameras and public appearances. She wrote about behavioural shifts that concerned her, moments when her son would retreat into himself, sudden episodes of tears that seemed to come without clear cause. She detailed how the usually cheerful and talkative child had become quieter, more withdrawn, less engaged with activities he had previously enjoyed. The sound of camera shutters, even from a distance, would cause visible reactions. Sessions with royal tutors, which had been manageable before, had become sources of resistance. Distress. Catherine noted specific incidents that had particularly troubled her. There were times when palace aides would arrive for scheduled visits or briefings, and Louis would hide rather than greet them as protocol suggested. He had begun asking questions that pierced through the formal explanations usually given to children about royal duties. Why did people always have to watch? Why couldn't they just be a normal family? These questions, coming from a child too young to fully understand the weight of his position, revealed an awareness that something about his life was fundamentally different and fundamentally difficult. The letters also revealed Catherine's internal struggle. She was not just a mother concerned for her child, but a future queen consort, a woman whose every action carried implications for the institution she had married into. Every request she made, every concern she raised, was weighed not just on its merits, but on its potential impact on public perception and institutional stability. She found herself navigating an impossible tension between her instinct to protect her son and her duty to support the monarchy. Palace advisors responded to her appeals with caution that bordered on resistance. They acknowledged her concerns but emphasized the broader picture. Withdrawing a child from public view, particularly without clear explanation, would generate speculation and potentially damaging headlines. The public had expectations, they argued, and managing those expectations required careful consideration. They counselled patience, suggesting that children go through phases and that Louis might adjust given time. They urged Catherine to consider the long-term implications of setting precedents that might complicate matters for George and Charlotte as well. But Catherine was not thinking in terms of precedents or public relations strategies. She was thinking about her child's immediate well-being, about the signs she was seeing that others seemed willing to rationalize away. Her frustration grew as meetings produced discussion but little action. Senior staff members who worked closely with the family during this period noticed a change in her demeanor. The diplomatic grace that usually characterized her interactions became strained. She was still professional, still composed in public, but those who knew her well could see the toll the situation was taking. One incident brought matters to a head. Prince Louis was scheduled to appear at a ceremonial event alongside his siblings, a relatively minor engagement by royal standards, but one deemed important for maintaining the family's public presence. On the morning of the event, Louis refused to leave his room. No amount of gentle encouragement, no promises or reassurances could persuade him to prepare for the appearance. Catherine spent over an hour with him, but his distress only increased at the prospect of facing cameras and crowds again. When palace officials insisted that the appearance could still happen, that perhaps Louis just needed more time to calm down, Catherine made a decision that sent shockwaves through the institution. She did not bring Louis to the event. Furthermore, she herself did not attend. It was the first time since joining the royal family that she had failed to appear at a scheduled engagement without prior notice or medical reason. The absence of both mother and son from an event where they were expected created immediate confusion and required rapid explanations to be offered to the press and public. This moment represented more than just a missed engagement. It was Catherine drawing a line, making clear through action rather than words that she would not force her child into situations that were causing him genuine distress, regardless of what protocols or schedules demanded. The message was received within palace corridors, though not necessarily welcomed. The institution had always operated on the principle that duty came first, that personal feelings and family matters were secondary to the requirements of the crown. Catherine's defiance of this principle, even in this limited way, challenged assumptions about how royal parents were expected to behave. The situation reached a critical point when medical professionals became involved in a formal capacity. Catherine had quietly arranged for her son to undergo a comprehensive evaluation at a private clinic in London, one known for its discretion and expertise in paediatric developmental assessments. She had resisted this step for some time, hoping that the behavioural changes might resolve on their own. But as the situation continued to worsen, she recognised that professional insight was necessary. The evaluation took place over several sessions, conducted away from palace grounds to ensure complete privacy and to allow Louis to be assessed in an environment free from the pressures of his usual surroundings. The results were compiled into a detailed report that was delivered to the family through carefully managed channels. The document made its way from the treating physician to a medical liaison who worked with the royal household, then to Catherine and William directly. What they read confirmed their fears while also providing clarity they had been seeking. The specialists had identified patterns consistent with a neurological sensitivity, a condition that, while manageable and not uncommon, was being significantly aggravated by the specific circumstances of Louis's life. The report explained that high-pressure environments, particularly those involving large crowds, constant observation, and the performance aspects of royal ceremonies, were triggering stress responses that exceeded what the child could healthily process. The assessment was clear in its recommendations. Continued exposure to these situations without intervention and substantial modification could result in lasting psychological effects. The solution proposed was unequivocal: immediate and extended removal from all public and press-related activities. However, what should have been a straightforward response to medical guidance became complicated by institutional considerations. Rather than being treated as urgent medical advice requiring swift action, the report was passed to the palace's communications team. These individuals, whose primary responsibility was managing the public image of the monarchy rather than the welfare of its individual members, began a process of analysis that focused on optics and messaging rather than implementation. Meetings were scheduled to discuss how to handle the situation, Risk assessments were conducted, examining potential public reactions to various scenarios. Strategy documents were drafted, exploring different approaches to explaining or justifying a withdrawal from public life. While these discussions took place, days turned into weeks, and the situation for Louis continued to deteriorate. He became more withdrawn at home, more reactive to ordinary situations, and increasingly difficult to comfort when distressed. Catherine received a follow-up copy of the medical report and found herself reading it repeatedly, each time becoming more distressed by the gap between what the doctors recommended and what was actually happening. Sources close to the family suggest that she reached a breaking point during this period, overwhelmed by the realization that the institution she had committed her life to was prioritizing image management over her child's well-being. She cancelled all her engagements for the following week, an unusual move that required explanations to be provided to various organizations and charities expecting her presence. During this time, Catherine essentially went off the grid in terms of royal duties. She remained at their residence, focused entirely on her son, and declined to participate in the planning meetings and briefings that usually filled her schedule. This absence created its own problems within the palace system, which operates on careful coordination and advanced planning. Events had to be reorganized, explanations had to be crafted, and questions had to be managed about why the Princess of Wales was suddenly unavailable. The physician who conducted the evaluation, growing increasingly concerned about the lack of action following the report's clear recommendations, reportedly sent a follow-up communication to the palace. This message carried a warning that further delays in implementing the recommended changes would raise serious ethical questions about the duty of care owed to the child. The language was professional but firm, making clear that medical advice was being ignored in favour of institutional considerations, and that this was not acceptable from a healthcare perspective. William, who had received his own copy of the report, found himself armed with undeniable medical evidence that could not be dismissed or reinterpreted through the lens of public relations. The document provided objective support for what he and Catherine had been observing and arguing for weeks. He now had professional validation that the course being pursued by the palace was not just inadvisable, but potentially harmful. This evidence became central to the confrontations that followed with senior family members and advisors. Yet even as the family struggled with how to proceed based on this medical information, another crisis was developing. Details from the confidential report began appearing in tabloid publications. The first mention was subtle, a brief item in a gossip column suggesting that Prince Louis was facing challenges that required temporary withdrawal from public duties. The language was vague enough that it could have been speculation, but its timing and certain specific phrases suggested that someone with knowledge of the actual situation was providing information to the press. Within a week, more detailed and disturbingly accurate information began to surface in various outlets. Articles referenced private consultations and mentioned behavioural concerns with a specificity that went beyond educated guessing. Some pieces even alluded to medical evaluations and therapeutic interventions, information that should have been known only to a very small circle of individuals. The pattern was clear. Someone with access to confidential information was leaking it to journalists. An internal review of who had access to the relevant documents and discussions revealed a concerning pattern. Every leak seemed to follow closely after meetings that involved only senior royals and their most trusted advisors. Yet somehow, within hours of these confidential discussions, whispers from those very conversations were showing up in publications known for their royal sources. The circle of people who could be responsible was small, which made the betrayal feel even more acute. Suspicion began to focus on certain quarters within the broader royal household. There were whispers that individuals connected to Queen Camilla's communications team had somehow gained access to information that should have been restricted to William and Catherine's immediate circle. These suggestions were never proven definitively, but the pattern of leaks and the content of what was being disclosed pointed towards someone operating from within the institutional structure rather than from outside it. The situation came to a head when Catherine requested a private meeting with Camilla. According to individuals familiar with what transpired, the atmosphere during this conversation was extremely tense. Catherine did not make direct accusations, but her message was unmistakable. She expressed in clear terms that boundaries had been crossed and that the situation had become intolerable. The specific words used during this exchange have not been publicly disclosed, but those aware of the meeting described it as one of the most uncomfortable encounters between the two women since Catherine joined the family. Shortly after this meeting, a senior press secretary who had worked closely with Camilla's office abruptly resigned from their position. No official explanation was provided for this departure, and no farewell statement was issued, which is unusual for someone in such a prominent role. Royal commentators noted that the timing seemed more than coincidental, occurring as it did in the immediate aftermath of the confrontation between Catherine and Camilla, and during a period when questions about information leaks were at their height. King Charles reportedly ordered some form of internal investigation into how confidential information had been compromised. But like many such inquiries within royal circles, the results were never made public. The palace maintained that privacy considerations prevented them from discussing internal matters, though critics suggested this was simply a way to avoid acknowledging that trust had been broken at the highest levels of the institution. For William, the leaks represented a fundamental violation that went beyond the immediate harm of private information becoming public. They revealed that even within his own family's household, there were individuals who could not be trusted with sensitive matters concerning his children. His response was swift and decisive. Several aides who were believed to have connections to the source of the leaks were removed from positions where they had access to Kensington Palace operations. Security protocols around information were tightened significantly. Perhaps most tellingly, William and Catherine began holding certain key discussions away from palace properties entirely. They recognized that the walls they had assumed provided security were actually compromised, that conversations held in what should have been private spaces were somehow finding their way to people who had no business knowing about them. This represented a profound loss of trust, not just in specific individuals, but in the system itself. The nanny who had cared for Prince Louis during his early years had maintained a private journal throughout her time with the family. This was not unusual. Many people in demanding or emotionally complex positions keep personal records as a way of processing their experiences. What was unusual was that this particular journal would eventually come to light in a way that provided an intimate window into what had been happening behind closed doors. The journal was discovered accidentally during a routine clearing of storage at one of the royal estates. A retired housekeeper, sorting through old belongings in a rarely used room, found a small leather-bound book tucked among children's clothing and forgotten toys. The handwriting inside was immediately recognizable to those familiar with household staff from that period. The entries were deeply personal, not written with any expectation that others would read them, which gave them a raw honesty that official accounts could never capture. The official statement from Kensington Palace arrived in the inboxes of news organisations and media outlets during the early morning hours, a timing carefully chosen to allow for coverage during the day's news cycle while avoiding the appearance of urgency that a middle-of-the-night announcement might convey. The document was labelled simply as a clarification regarding recent speculation, a framing that attempted to position the palace as responding to public curiosity rather than addressing a crisis of its own making. The text itself was remarkably brief, consisting of no more than 6 sentences. It acknowledged that adjustments had been made to Prince Louis's schedule of public engagements. The statement referenced his ongoing emotional wellness and development as the primary considerations behind this decision. It offered reassurance that the choice had been made with careful thought and in consultation with appropriate professionals. The language was measured, almost clinical in its precision, designed to convey information without revealing details that might invite further questioning or speculation. What stood out immediately to those familiar with royal communications was the use of the phrase emotional wellness. This was not standard terminology in palace statements. Previous announcements regarding children had referenced education, privacy, or age-appropriate scheduling. The introduction of language specifically addressing emotional and psychological considerations represented new territory. It was an acknowledgement, however veiled, that something beyond ordinary family preferences or logistical concerns was at play. The statement provided no timeline for when Prince Louis might return to public duties. There was no mention of this being a temporary measure with a defined endpoint, nor was there any suggestion that it might be permanent. The open-ended nature of the announcement left everything to interpretation. It could mean a few months, it could mean years, or it could mean that the young prince's public role was being fundamentally reconsidered. The The ambiguity seemed deliberate, preserving flexibility for the family while avoiding commitments that might later prove difficult to maintain. Notably absent from the statement was any comment from Prince William or Catherine themselves. In previous situations where royal children had been the subject of public discussion or concern, their parents had typically found ways to address the matter directly, even if briefly. A casual remark during a public engagement, a line included in a speech, or a brief comment to assembled press would usually suffice to add a personal dimension to official announcements. This time there was complete silence from both parents beyond the formal palace statement. The public reaction was immediate and divided along predictable lines. Many expressed support for the Wales family, praising them for prioritising their son's well-being over public expectations and traditional obligations. Comments on social media and in newspaper opinion sections applauded what was seen as a modern approach to royal parenting, one that recognised children as individuals with needs that might conflict with institutional requirements. These supporters argued that the monarchy needed to evolve to reflect contemporary understanding of child development and mental health. However, an equally vocal segment of the public responded with scepticism and frustration. These critics questioned why the statement was so vague, why no clear explanation was provided for what seemed like an unprecedented situation. Some pointed out that previous generations of royals had managed public duties from young ages without such considerations, suggesting that excessive accommodation was being made for what might be normal childhood behaviour. Others expressed concern that the lack of transparency was fueling conspiracy, theories and speculation that could ultimately prove more damaging than honest disclosure would have been. The conspiracy theories emerged almost immediately, spreading rapidly across social media platforms and online forums. Hashtags related to Prince Louis trended for days, with theories ranging from serious health concerns that were being concealed from the public to suggestions of family conflicts resulting in the child being hidden away. Some theories ventured into territory that was entirely speculative and unsupported by any evidence, but the absence of detailed official information created a vacuum that such speculation readily filled. Royal commentators and historians began drawing comparisons to previous situations involving young royals who had stepped back from public life or whose appearances had been limited. Some reference Prince Harry's struggles with media attention during his youth, though the circumstances were quite different. Others looked further back to earlier generations, noting that the modern expectation of constant visibility for royal children is actually a relatively recent phenomenon. Historical precedent existed for royal children being raised largely away from public view, particularly in their early years. What made this situation distinct from those historical comparisons was the context in which it was occurring. The Wales family had established a pattern of carefully controlled but regular public appearances for all three children. Prince Louis had become a familiar presence at major events, and his personality had already made an impression on the public consciousness. His withdrawal represented a break from an established pattern rather than the continuation of privacy that had existed from birth. This made the change more noticeable and more likely to generate questions. The statement also raised questions about the future structure and expectations of royal duties for the younger generation. If the pressures of public life were deemed too intense for a child in Prince Louis's position, what did that mean for his siblings? Would George and Charlotte face similar reassessments as they grew older? The implications extended beyond one child's situation to the broader question of how the monarchy would function in an era of increased awareness about mental health and child welfare. Some observers noted that the palace's response reflected broader societal shifts in how childhood and well-being are understood. 50 years ago, such a statement would have been unthinkable. Children were expected to adapt to circumstances without much consideration for their emotional responses. Today, there is greater recognition that children are individuals whose psychological health matters and that subjecting them to stress or pressure that exceeds their capacity to cope is inappropriate, regardless of family circumstances or institutional expectations. Yet the statement's careful neutrality also left room for darker interpretations. The phrase "best interests," while reassuring on its surface, has been used in various contexts to justify decisions that might be controversial or difficult to explain directly. Without more specific information about what circumstances led to this decision, some observers worried that the vagueness concealed realities that would be troubling if fully understood. This concern was particularly acute given the earlier leaks, suggesting serious behavioural and emotional struggles. The international media response varied considerably, depending on national perspectives on monarchy and privacy. British outlets generally treated the statement with a degree of respect for royal privacy, while still raising questions about transparency. American media tended toward more speculative coverage, often drawing parallels to other celebrity children and discussing the pressures of growing up in the public eye. European royal watchers compared the situation to how other monarchies handle the balance between public duties and family privacy, with some suggesting that the British system places unusually high demands on even its youngest members. Behind the public statement lay another layer of complexity that was not immediately apparent to most observers. The decision to issue the announcement at all represented the culmination of extensive internal debate about how to manage a situation that had already spiraled beyond easy control. The leaks to the media, the growing public speculation, and the questions being asked during press briefings had made silence increasingly untenable. Yet the family clearly remained reluctant to provide the kind of detailed explanation that might satisfy public curiosity, suggesting that the full story involved elements they were determined to keep private. Within royal circles, there was quiet acknowledgement that this situation represented new and uncertain territory. The protocols and precedents that governed so much of royal life offered limited guidance for a scenario that involved medical considerations, mental health concerns, and a child's well-being in conflict with institutional expectations. The statement represented an attempt to navigate this uncharted territory while maintaining as much control over the narrative as possible. Some within the palace system reportedly argued that more transparency would have been preferable, that a fuller explanation of the circumstances would have prevented the worst speculation and demonstrated that the family was acting responsibly in response to genuine needs. Others maintained that protecting a child's medical privacy was paramount and that providing details would only invite more intrusive questions and more harmful speculation. The statement that was ultimately issued represented a compromise between these positions, offering acknowledgement without elaboration. What remained unaddressed in the official statement were the questions about systemic issues within the royal institution itself. If a child in Prince Louis's position was experiencing stress severe enough to require complete withdrawal from public life, what did that suggest about the expectations being placed on young royals generally? Were the systems in place to support royal children adequate to their needs? Has the focus on public image and institutional continuity overshadowed consideration of individual well-being? These larger questions lingered beneath the surface of the immediate situation, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable within the constraints of official palace communications. The statement concluded with a request for privacy and understanding, standard language in such announcements, but carrying particular weight given the circumstances. The family was asking for space to manage a difficult situation away from public scrutiny, yet the very nature of monarchy makes such requests inherently complicated. The royal family exists in a state of perpetual visibility, their lives serving as public performance and national symbol. Stepping back from that role, even temporarily and even for the most legitimate reasons, creates tension with the fundamental expectations of the institution they represent.